I believe that this blow to his nervous system led to serious mental disorders. I believe that Mr. Arnold was temporarily insane, and therefore I find him not guilty. It's outrageous, Jacob growled from his seat, causing Judge Parker to slam his gavel down hard, threatening to hold Jacob accountable for contempt of court. The sight of Jacob, his face red with anger, made me happy. Jacob's victory over me just took a small hit. However, I wanted to take revenge on him so badly. However, having just avoided jail time, I had to put any thoughts of revenge on hold for the foreseeable future. Besides, I had no idea how to hit them back. Outside the courtroom, Jacob was waiting for me. The thought came to me to try to push him to attack me. But I wasn't sure how this would turn out, so I just called the bailiff. I shouldn't be closer than 150 meters from this man, but he's stopping me from leaving. The bailiff looked at Jacob and told him to move on. Jacob shouted over his shoulder, "This is not the end yet. I'm gonna sue you." This bothered me, so I asked my lawyer, "Yissy, can he sue me?" "Any person can sue anyone else." He smiled, "But his case is weak. But if you really want to pull the rug out from under him, don't accept anything other than an offer to pay for his medical expenses that weren't covered by insurance." I did so in a letter addressed to his office. Jacob did not respond or file a lawsuit. The evening after the trial, it had been just over 9 weeks since Carol dropped that bombshell on me. Although I was still seething with hatred, the victory in court lifted my spirits a little, and I decided to invite Kimberly to dinner. I also had some exciting news to share with her. Kimberly and I agreed to meet at a small Italian restaurant. That evening, she had to work a little later because things weren't going well in my old department. Nothing serious. They were just getting used to my absence. Anyway, when she arrived, she looked great. Kimberly was still overweight, but it was obvious that she had lost weight, and the dress she wore was very flattering. I stood up and kissed her on the cheek. "Wow, you look great. You've lost weight, haven't you?" Kimberly beamed. "Yes, I lost 15 pounds. Sorry I didn't notice earlier, but you're wearing those oversized sweatshirts and sweatpants. Anyway, like I said, you look great." The restaurant was small and cozy. This was exactly the place that couples choose for a date. But I didn't think of it as a date. It was just a meeting between two close friends. "I asked you to have dinner with me today because I wanted to celebrate my victory in court, and I have news. I found a job." "This is wonderful," Kimberly rejoiced. "Who will you work for?" "Sable Security from Jacksonville, Florida," I answered. "I didn't know they had an office here," Kimberly said with concern. "No, I'll have to move to Jacksonville." And he was completely surprised when the light went out in Kimberly's eyes and tears began to roll down her cheeks. "Actually, I thought you'd be happy for me," I said, confused. "I'm glad you got a job," Kimberly said as the tears continued to flow. "But you'll be 600 miles away from me." "Kimberly, remember you told me not to let my wife's betrayal consume me with hatred?" She nodded. "Now I understand that the only way to do this is to put some distance between Carol and me and let time do the rest." "I understand," Kimberly said, wiping her eyes. "I'll just miss you. I really enjoyed having a friend." "Hey, I'm just a phone call away," I said, trying unsuccessfully to cheer her up. I was really surprised by Kimberly's reaction. Then it dawned on me that she probably didn't have many friends, so I made another offer. "You could come and visit me if you want." "I don't know what Jacksonville has to offer, but I'll find out." "Do you really want me to come visit?" she asked. "Of course," I answered quickly. "Remember, I won't have friends there either." "When are you leaving?" Kimberly finally asked. "I'm leaving only in 45 days, but before that time, I have a lot to do. I need to find housing, open a new bank account. I also need to take a lie detector test, get fingerprinted, and pass other tests. I think it will take at least 2 trips there to get it all done." After this, my mood improved somewhat, but I noticed that Kimberly was not eating much. I figured she was still a little upset. In fact, the closer the time came for me to leave, the sadder Kimberly became every day. She seemed to be hoping for something more between us. I have to admit, this confused me because I felt that Kimberly could do a much better job than I could. I spent my last evening before starting my new job in Kimberly's apartment. She prepared a delicious dinner, which was complimented by a chocolate cake with the inscription, "I'll miss you." After I helped her clean up, we watched TV until it was time for bed. I kissed her on the lips before heading to the guest room. At night, I felt the bed move slightly, and someone's body slid next to me. Still half asleep, I realized it was Kimberly, and she was naked. As quickly as I could, I pulled off my panties and lifted my t-shirt over my head. When I turned to face Kimberly, she pressed herself against my body, and I felt her silky, smooth skin. Her soft breasts pressed against my chest, and it all felt wonderful. I kissed her on the lips, and she responded with desperate passion. When I clung to Kimberly, she sobbed. I started to worry that maybe I had hurt her, or she was angry that I took advantage of her, or something like that. "What happened, Kimberly?" I asked, almost in a panic. "Did I offend you?" "No, I'm just so happy," Kimberly said, laying her head on my chest. "I've already had sex with 5 or 6 men, but this is the first time I've made love." "Thank you." We lay there for several long minutes before Kimberly slid off my bed. She took 2 steps towards the door and then came back to me. She leaned over and kissed me. "Will you sleep with me in my bed tonight?" I happily agreed, if only because my bed was completely wet. Besides, sleeping with Kimberly seemed like the perfect way to spend my last night in this city. After breakfast, I checked my car one last time to make sure I had everything. Then I turned to Kimberly and kissed her. She responded with perhaps the most passionate kiss I've ever received. Then, unfortunately, it was time for me to leave. As my car pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Kimberly sitting on the side of the road. She buried her head in her hands and sobbed. I desperately didn't want to leave her, but I knew it was best this way. I still loved Carol and was therefore damaged goods, but it was even funny because I no longer thought about revenge. Just deep down, I had a deep sadness. Jacksonville was an interesting city, but I didn't get to see much of it. I threw myself into my new job. I worked long hours, not just to make up for lost time, but because it helped me forget about Carol. I kept in touch with Kimberly, and she always seemed so happy when she heard from me, and so sad when our phone conversation ended. It was from her that I heard the news that I was so afraid of. Carol and Jacob got married about a month after their divorce was finalized. I also learned that Carol had a baby girl. For some reason, this news didn't excite me as much. Perhaps I was beginning to overcome the resentment and humiliation. True, I no longer had sleepless nights. I also rarely woke up in the morning depressed because Carol wasn't there in bed next to me. In March, Kimberly came and spent 4 days with me. Since we hadn't seen each other for a while, we weren't sure about our relationship. We kinda danced around the issue of sex and didn't sleep together until the last 2 nights. It was almost as intense as that first time. Only this time, I had rubber bands on hand. About a year after that, I was told that I could hire an administrative assistant for my team. Sable Security was significantly larger than my old company. While Zaba had 1 team dedicated to cybersecurity, we had 6. And over this year, I went from being a simple member of 1 team to its leader. Since the decision about who to hire was mine, I immediately called Kimberly. I barely had time to explain the job to her before she said she wanted it. When I met Kimberly at the airport, my breath caught. As I expected, she was great. When she got out of the passenger compartment, I saw the men's heads shoot up, but all she wanted was to get to me. She threw herself into my arms and kissed me with such passion that my knees went weak. The plan was for Kimberly to stay with me until she found her own apartment. I thought it would only take a week, but the search lasted for weeks. There was something wrong with every apartment she looked at. I didn't complain, because Kimberly and I slept in the same bed. It's funny that during the 1.5 years that I lived in Jacksonville, I thought about Carol less and less. And when Kimberly appeared, I stopped thinking about her altogether. However, I knew that Kimberly would eventually move, and I was dreading that day. 5 weeks later, I asked Kimberly about her apartment situation and she started crying. I was completely dumbfounded. I knew I made her cry, but I didn't understand why. "I'm really sorry," I apologized. Did I say something wrong? Do you want me to leave? Kimberly asked timidly. Hell no, I said decisively. I would like you to stay forever, but I understand that one day you will want to leave. I need time to get ready. I would ask you to marry me, but you are too good for me. No, that's not true, Kimberly protested. I've loved you almost from the day I started working at Zaba. I would marry you in a heartbeat. This changed everything for us. That same day, we went ring shopping and started planning our wedding. Although I was afraid that Kimberly would eventually leave me for someone else, I was so in love with her that I had to take the risk. 6 months later, Kimberly and I got married. A year after that, Kimberly gave birth to a little boy whom we named Mikey Jr. 18 months after that, we had a girl named Charlotte. I moved up at Sable to lead all 8 cybersecurity teams. Yes, we have added 2 more. Kimberly, on the other hand, chose to stay home. Around Christmas, 3 years later, I was called into a meeting. At this meeting, I learned that Sable was planning to acquire Zaba security software. I was to be part of a team that would conduct due diligence before the acquisition was completed. During the years that Kimberly and I were married, Kimberly's mother died, and my parents retired. They moved to Jacksonville to be closer to their grandchildren and me. Taking them on as babysitters, I planned to use the week-long trip as a mini vacation. I also wanted to use Kimberly's skills as an administrative assistant to help me conduct my investigation. This way, I could take Kimberly to work with me every day, where she could see some of the people she worked with, and we could sneak away for long lunches together. During my week in Nashville, I learned 4 things. First, I learned that this facility was the only place Zaba did cybersecurity. Second, Jacob was promoted to Chief Operating Officer and Carol to Senior Project Manager. Third, despite my dislike of Jacob, I found him to be an excellent manager of the company. From my point of view, all his activities were first class. And the last thing I knew was that Zaba was having their Christmas party on Friday night and I had to go to it. Other than our team's initial introductions to Jacob, I had no contact with him. Also, during the entire week, I didn't see Carol once. However, everything changed at the Christmas party. Zaba rented a ballroom at the Hilton Doubletree in downtown Nashville. It was festively decorated, tables lined the dance floor, and a group of 5 people sat in one of the corners. They played soft Christmas carols, soft background music, and, from time to time, played old songs. After dinner and speeches, dancing was to take place. There was also a bar open, much to everyone's delight, and he attracted more and more attention as more people arrived. Jacob, Carol, and some of Zaba's senior staff were there to greet the Sable team. I wasn't looking forward to it. I didn't know how I would react to having to face Jacob and Carol. However, my fears were in vain. Jacob, I already knew, looked about the same, and Carol, although looking a little older, was still good-looking. Strangely, I didn't feel anything when they came to greet us. Mike, I'm glad you were able to join us tonight, Jacob said nervously. I hope our past disagreements will not interfere with the acquisition. Not from me, I assured him. This is ancient history. And who is this beauty? Jacob smiled widely, taking Kimberly's hand. This is my beloved wife, Kimberly, I said, kissing her on the cheek. Jacob's smile fell as he looked at Kimberly and then at me. Kimberly smirked at Jacob. Don't you remember me, Jacob? I was Michael's administrative assistant when he worked at Zaba, but I changed my job and became Michael's wife. This was a huge promotion for me. Jacob's eyes narrowed even more, but he tried to smile again. However, she didn't seem sincere. Of course, so much time has passed. Sorry I didn't recognize you. Jacob moved on, but his gaze continued to wander over Kimberly and me. Then Carol moved closer to me. Michael, you look very good, she said, taking my hand. And your wife is gorgeous. I didn't know you got married. We will be married for 7 years in March, Kimberly said with a smile, hugging my hand. Both you and Jacob look good, I replied, and then asked, How is your daughter doing? Carol winced at first, but then smiled. She's doing great. Tammy is in second grade and her brother, Jacob Jr., is in kindergarten. Do you have children? 2, Kimberly answered. Mickey Jr. goes to kindergarten, and Charlotte is still at home with me. They are both doing well. Thank you for asking. After that, Carol moved on, and soon after, Kimberly and I walked away to find our table. The food was excellent and the speeches were fortunately short. Sable's CEO simply reassured everyone that no one's job was in jeopardy, at least for the next year, and that he was looking forward to the merger. When dinner was over, the music started, and Kimberly and I did a few laps around the stage. I think today's young people have missed the boat when it comes to dancing. Slow dancing with your loved one is such an intimate thing. It can connect two people in much the same way that sex can. One evening, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and saw Carol standing there. Kimberly turned to see who I was looking at, and her eyes narrowed as she realized it was my ex-wife. Carol smiled sweetly at Kimberly. "Can I ask your husband to dance?" Kimberly looked at me and then smiled at Carol. "Only if you remember where to return it." I took Carol out onto the dance floor, and we danced in silence for about a minute. "Michelle, I just want to apologize to you for what Jacob and I did back then," she said, with sincere remorse in her voice. "You didn't deserve any of this." But when I found out that I was pregnant with Jacob's child, I realized that everything was over between us. Therefore, I decided to make our breakup quick and simple. I didn't even think about how painful it would be for you. I shouldn't have let Jacob talk me into the scorched earth policy we were using. This was completely inappropriate. I laughed a little. As people say, it's either water under the bridge or water over the dam. Now it doesn't matter. We all moved on. Besides, I kinda got something out of it. I beat the crap out of Jacob. Apparently, I didn't do much damage to his testicles, because you had a second child. Carol giggled at this. We danced a little in silence, and I decided to bury the hatchet between us, once and for all. "Listen, Carol," I began hesitantly. "I admit, I was very sad when you left me for Jacob. It took me many months to come to terms with your loss, but now we are both happily married and have children. I believed that this was meant to happen." Carol burst out laughing, and when I looked at her face, a tear was running down her cheek. Did I say something wrong? Carol just shook her head. "No, Michael, you didn't say anything bad. It's just not what you think. At first glance, everyone thinks that we are the perfect couple. And in the first year, I would have agreed with them. But Jacob is just a charming manipulator. He uses people and then discards them. I know he cheated on me many times, but he is not as smart as he thinks. Every time I find out he cheated on me, I cheat on him." My mouth opened and Carol noticed it. She giggled. "It's a hell of a way to live, I know," she said sadly. "I should have left Jacob when I found out what he really was like, but I was too ashamed and I was too proud. Michael, I'm glad you found happiness, but I will always regret leaving you. You and my children are the best thing that ever happened to me." We continued talking until the song ended. Carol then walked me back to my table and thanked Kimberly for letting her borrow me. As Kimberly and I danced our last dance that evening, it dawned on me that her advice years ago had been proven correct. If I refused to move on from Carol, she could very well be my undoing. It's probably true what they say. When God closes one door, he opens another. When I lost Carol, I was completely devastated. But then God allowed me to find Kimberly, and I can't even imagine life without her. "So, what did you and Carol talk about?" Kimberly finally asked. "Is she trying to win you back?" I laughed and kissed her, as if she has any chance of doing this. "Okay," Kimberly said, resting her head on my shoulder. "Just remember that I am a gelos woman. I'll tear off your you-know-what if you ever try to leave me." And she only brought it up because she heard that not everything was rosy and sunny in their marriage. "Carol told me the same thing," I agreed, "but I think they will stay together for the sake of the children. Once the kids are grown, I wouldn't bet on this marriage surviving. What a sad way to live your life." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.